We met at a sushi restaurant in Uptown, a neighborhood close to Minneapolis. I thought she was gorgeous. And when we started talking, I really liked her personality too. I could tell halfway through our date that I wanted to see her again. I knew for sure I was going to ask her out again when the topic of our parents came up. And instead of ignoring the subject or lying to her and telling her what my stepdad did for work, I told her the truth. I told her my dad was not a part of my life, and I told her why. I didn't go into crazy detail because it was the first date, but I told her, and I was fine. No beads of sweat or embarrassing moments. I was comfortable enough around this girl to tell her the truth. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise, and today we are doing part 4 of Tyler Zedd's Trailer Park Parable. This is the end, our last episode together. And if you're like me, you've been crying all week. This book has been so raw and honest and vulnerable, so real in its depiction of all of the things that he and his mom and brothers went through. This episode is going to be no different. Don't put those tissues away. You're going to need them. But you may be crying for a different reason. The ending of this chapter, or the ending of this section, is so cathartic. The ending of the book is just top notch. And so if you've walked this whole journey with us this far, and you felt the weight and the worth of everything that they've had to go through, and you've cried and pulled for them along the way, the ending of this book is just so inspirational. And you guys remember how at the beginning of the year, I had talked about wanting to do Matthew Perry's memoir, and then I got off of that because I was like, I don't know. Like there was like some scandals kind of talk, and people were like, he's representing a false image of himself and all this. And I got some blowback from choosing not to cover it. But the thing is, you know what, guys? I'm so glad I didn't, because then I had room for this book. And this is the inspirational tale I would much rather bring you. This book is 1,000 times better than Matthew Perry's book, and I don't care. I don't care that Matthew Perry was rich, famous, millionaire, whatever. This book is 1,000% better than us having wasted our time on Matthew Perry's memoir. So, you can thank me later. And all you naysayers in the comments who were all angry about Matthew Perry and, I wasn't giving him a fair chance and whatever, save it. Because I just offered you a steak dinner compared to that soggy cereal with expired milk we would have been reading. So just saying. All right. This is, we are going to be covering chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 today, except 15 is like one page, so it doesn't really count. But we start out the tale today talking about the role that Desmond had in the family. Of the brothers, as we said before, he, by his own admission, was kind of worrywartish, always thinking about, like one step ahead, trying to always have a plan. And that was sort of the role that he played. Also, he was the protector. And so he gives us an example of how, even from early on, he took great responsibility for his younger brothers. It's April 1998. He writes, "Make sure you watch him. Don't let him get out of your sight," Dad said to me. We were at my Uncle Tron and Aunt Kelly's in the springtime, and I wanted to play outside in the woods and bring Bo with me. He turned 2 that January, so he could keep up with me walking. But like any 2-year-old, he walked with a waddle and wanted to get into everything he saw. I was just about to turn 8 in May, and we were moving from Duluth to Brainerd. Where we were moving from in Duluth was much different than Tron and Kelly's. We lived in a part of Duluth down the street from an area called Morgan Park. Duluth overall has the highest rate of poverty in the state, but the Morgan Park area rate is slightly higher. In Duluth, they lived in a 900 square foot 2-bedroom palace. My mom and dad had one room, and my brothers and I shared the other. The houses were cramped into the neighborhood, but the best part about all the houses jammed in there were all of the kids who lived in our neighborhood. We had a little army of 6 to 8-year-olds running the place. We loved it there in Duluth, but I loved being at Tron and Kelly's in the countryside more. Living in the country and going outside to do whatever we wanted in the woods whenever we wanted. We would shoot our BB guns, we would throw rocks as far as we could into the pond, or we could build a fort. Anything. It was amazing. I took Bo with me outside and I told him, "Follow me. Do not leave my side." He looked at me like he understood, but I couldn't tell for sure. As a worrywart, I always had to be prepared. The only thing I couldn't protect us from was a skunk spray. If one of those stinkers got us, we would have to bear the stink, but I was willing to gamble to try to find a few eggs. Well, isn't this the most endearing little picture? Little 7-year-old, almost 8-year-old Desmond and little waddling along Bo, and he's over there, trying to watch his brother and come up with something interesting for them both to do. And it's like, just be still my heart. It's like the sweetest little picture. And he finds what he thinks might be some turtle eggs. So he's trying to tell Bo, you got to keep up. And he says, as the older brother, I had to make sure that I whipped him into shape. He had to listen to me. I reminded him. You stay right here by me, I said. As we were walking down the road, I saw a little hole in the driveway ahead. Turtle eggs, Bo! I ran over to the hole and I started digging. I got down a few inches. No eggs. A few more inches. No eggs. Dang it, I said. False alarm. I realized while I was digging that I'd lost track of Bo. I stood up from the hole and I looked around for him. I couldn't see him. Bo! I yelled. I started panicking. Bo, where the heck are you? I spun around and I looked toward the pond, about 20 yards away from where I was standing in the driveway. And there he was, face down in the water, arms and legs out like a starfish. He was floating away from the shoreline. I ran down into the water and jumped in, water up to my knee, and grabbed him by the ankle, dragging him back to shore and out of the water. Bo spit up water and started sobbing. He sat on the shore with every inch of him soaking wet. I took his coat off and gave him my dry jacket. Luckily for him, it was in the 40s, but even then, you didn't want to be outside when you're soaking wet at those temps. Growing up in Minnesota and playing outside all the time in the snow, you learn fast the do's and don'ts of the cold. What were you doing? I scolded him. I was relieved that I'd saved him, and I wasn't responsible for the drowning of my little brother. But I knew what was waiting for me when I got back to the camper. My dad is going to be pissed. He told me to watch Bo, and for just a minute I didn't, and it almost turned out to be a disaster. We walked back down the dirt driveway. The whole way back, Bo cried. And as much as I wanted to scold him more, it wouldn't change anything. Besides, he clearly knew he'd screwed up. I didn't need to hammer him any more. Already, he's different than his father. My heart was racing when we got back to the camper, partially because my brother just almost died, and partially because of the consequences I was about to face. I opened the door, and there was Dad, his face scrunched. He must have heard my brother crying. What the fuck is going on? He growled. Bo fell in the pond, I said, eyes on the ground. You were supposed to be fucking watching him. He grabbed the back of my neck with his claw and spanked me until I cried. I knew other kids got spanked, but as I laid there and cried, I wondered why I had just gotten in so much trouble. I did, in fact, watch out for my brother. Had I just left him to fend for himself, he'd be dead. He would have drowned had I not pulled him out of the pond, and I got punished for saving him. He got wet, yes, but I watched over my little brother. I did. I knew I did. Walking on eggshells was the norm, and after that I was hyper cautious about what I did around Dad and what kind of repercussions everything carried. One wrong step on a creaky floorboard would spark an ass whooping, and I hated ass whoopings. So I did whatever I could do to make sure we avoided them. And with that in mind, of him as Bo's caretaker, of him bearing the weight of the responsibility for what happened to Bo, we're going to go back to the night of the incident. So he starts it back off where he's in the cop car. He's calling his grandmother. He's letting her know that something happened, that Dad hurt Mom. I sat with Bo in the back of the squad car and I watched as 2 ambulances pulled up to the end of our driveway. I called our family friends Dan and Laco, who lived down the street less than half a mile away. Laco, something bad happened. I don't know what to do now, and you guys are the only ones I can call besides my grandma and uncles. In less than 2 minutes, Dan and Laco were standing outside the window of the squad car. On Christmas Eve, they dropped everything to come to our side. I could only talk to them through our car window, and we didn't say much, but having them there with us was the most important thing. I watched as Dan and Laco spoke with some police officers, and I tried to help us figure out what was going on. The whole time, we all watched the house and waited. I prayed and prayed as hard as I could that I would see Mom and Devin walk out. The whole time, we all watched the house and waited. I prayed and prayed as hard as I could that I would see Mom and Devin walk out okay. God, please, please let Devin and Mom be safe, please. Grandpa, if you're there, please be with them right now, please. Over and over in my head. The first person out was Devin. He was handcuffed. A police officer walked him to the back of a separate squad car. Why the hell is my brother handcuffed, I thought. I tried to get a police officer's attention to ask him, but they ignored me through the glass. The second person out was Mom, and she was walking, barely. She was aided by 2 EMTs, one on each side of her, and she was holding a cloth on her face. I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was alive, and that's all that mattered. They put her in an ambulance and drove away. Finally, Dad came out rolled on a stretcher. I had no idea what had happened to him and frankly didn't care. All I cared about was Devin and Mom and if they were okay. But I wanted to know more. "What's going on?" I said to one of the officers who opened the door to talk with us. "They'll talk to you guys more at the police station," he said. "Can I get some shoes for my brother first?" I asked. The adrenaline was wearing off and my feet started to feel the icy cold from my now sopping wet socks. The officer brought a pair of shoes for Bo and Bo gave me back my shoes. Laco and Dan were still there outside the car. "Your grandma and uncles are on the way. Tron's going to meet you at the police station and you'll stay with them tonight. Your mom's going to be okay. I love you guys so much," Laco said. We said goodbye and Bo and I were driven to the Brainerd police station where an investigator was waiting for us. My mind raced the entire time. We had no idea what had happened in the house. We had no idea what was going on with our mom or Devin, and I needed to know. The investigator talked to me first. When I went into the room with him, the first thing I asked was, "Where's my brother, Devin?" "He's talking to one of the other officers right now," the investigator said. "Is he in trouble or something? Why was he handcuffed?" "We're trying to figure out everything right now. The most important thing is I need you to tell me everything about tonight." So he gives him the whole summary. He tells him that his dad was acting weird, that his dad had been acting weird, that he had warned his mom that they shouldn't go back, but that they decided to go home anyway. He told him about how his dad had shown up, how his dad had broken the window, how his dad had busted up into the house, how they had escaped, how he and his brothers had escaped, but then he had sent Devin back in with the hunting knife. After I talked with him, he brought Bo into the room for about 20 minutes. As Bo was in there giving the account of the night, I sat alone in the police station break room. No phone, just a TV playing a Christmas story, and my own thoughts swirling. It's hard to explain what a dreamlike state it is if you haven't experienced it. Something so surreal is happening that you're sure you're dreaming. I sat there in disbelief. This is our life. It's really happening like this right now, like for real. I kept wondering, why? I looked up at a Christmas story. I kept forgetting it was Christmas Eve. The investigator left us there, and a few minutes later, Devin joined us. I was relieved to see him. "What happened?" I asked him. Devin shook his head. He wouldn't stop. I didn't press any further. I knew what he did. Through a glass window in the break room, I saw my Uncle Tron and Cousin Aaron standing in the doorway of the police station. The investigator walked us through the station and told us that we would hear more from them in the coming days. We got in the car with Tron and Aaron and drove to our trailer house in the countryside. Once there, Grandma, Uncle Brent, and Aunt Cassandra, that's Brent's wife, and all my cousins were there waiting for us. Grandma hugged us the second we walked in the door. Our entire family, 14 of us besides Mom and Dad, were jammed into the trailer that Christmas Eve. As I laid beneath the Christmas tree that night, the shock wore off, and my body and mind were more exhausted than they'd ever been. So the next morning, his uncles go to the hospital to see his mom, but she's in real bad shape, and they're not ready for the boys to see her just yet. Now, if you can believe it, his mom is in one room, and his dad is down the hall in another. That door that the dad was in was guarded by a policeman. Probably a good thing, because Desmond says my Uncle Brent told me that he started walking over to my dad's room, but an officer stationed outside had stopped him from going any further. Brent didn't say it, but I know that if that officer wasn't there to stop him, he would have killed my dad for what he'd done to his sister. We didn't do much that Christmas Day after opening presents, and my brothers and I didn't say much. We were exhausted, and we just wanted to wake up from this bad dream. No one wanted to talk about the night before. Later that evening, both my uncles were back at Tron and Kelly's, and they were out in Tron's shop, which had a TV and a big work area. That evening, I started to walk outside to join them. When I got close, I could see through the window. I saw Devin talking to my uncles, and he started sobbing. My Uncle Brent hugged him as he continued to cry. Without my family there with us, I don't know what we would have done. Seriously, what could they have done? I mean, at least they had the family to fall back on. And if this book tells me anything, it's this. If you don't live near your family, go get near your family. If you can persuade one of your family members to come move near you, do it. We need each other. And if you have a rift with somebody in your family, make it better. Because can you imagine how different this story would be if Desmond, Devin, Bo, and Trisha had not had family? This would have been a completely different story, I think. And I think those boys would have turned out different too. We have got to have community. We have to have real people in our lives, and as this section is going to go on, it does not help you to isolate yourself from others. You must find community. You must find people, like-minded people, who you can live real life with, who you can actually call and they will show up for you. All right, now we're on to chapter 12. We are going back to Devin's story. So you'll recall that Devin had dealt completely differently with the situation with the dad, but also not surprisingly because they'd played different roles that night. Devin had gone in and had to deal with the situation like a man and make some calls that would have been horrific to make. He's 16 years old. And so it's not really surprising that the way he dealt with it was different than the way that Desmond dealt with it. Although I think both of their personalities were such that, you know, maybe they could have had their roles reversed and still would have dealt with it differently. Who's to say? But you recall that Devin had moved to Colorado with his girlfriend, Emma, and they were just living a really unsettling lifestyle. It was basically go to work at the restaurant, you know, come home, get high, pass out, wake up and do it again over and over and over and over. Their apartment was a place to get drugs. Emma apparently had some kind of hookup for the pills. Anyway, he had decided that he needed to get real because one day he came home from work and saw that she has passed out on the bed. And he thought that he had seen his girlfriend either dead or almost dead. Anyway, she overdosed and he was able to get help and they called the ambulance and everything and she was fine. But it made him realize this is a toxic lifestyle. Like, I've got to do something. Like, I can't live out the rest of my days like this. I've got to do something about this. So he moved back to Minnesota. But the problem was that in Colorado, yes, he was numbing himself. But here in Minnesota, there were 1,000 things to trigger him, necessitating the need to numb the pain. And he had learned that if you drink enough, you can pass out and you don't feel it anymore. If you can get high enough, you don't have to feel it anymore. And so being in Minnesota didn't actually help his addictions at all. Now, the chapter starts out, he is in a facility that is not great. And let's find out how he got there. The chapter starts out this way. May 2012. "I'll cut your throat, motherfucker," a man yelled from across the room from where Devin was sitting down playing spades with some of the other patients. The three other men and Devin continued playing cards like there was nothing abnormal about the situation because, frankly, it wasn't abnormal for the place Devin was in. He was at a state-run rehab facility in the Twin Cities area. It was a place where prison inmates went as part of their sentencing. Devin said there were men who came from prison who said they'd rather go back to their jail cell than to be in this, quote, hellhole. Devin was there and not at a more professional facility for a number of reasons. It had started about a year earlier when Devin was at my mom's house. Mom came home from work one day and found Devin unresponsive in the basement. She thought he was dead and called the ambulance for help. They arrived and it turned out Devin had overdosed on some benzos. If my mom hadn't found him when she did, he would have definitely died. And let us not forget this is the second time a family member has found him passed out. Remember in the last chapter when his uncles came, he was late for work and his uncles showed up at his house to find out where he was, and there he was passed out. He had had so much alcohol that he'd blacked out, and there he was with a bottle next to him. Now his mom finds him and he's overdosed on benzos. So it's like, you know, the chapter goes on to say that he's not suicidal, but I wouldn't say he was suicidal, but it definitely seems like he did not respect his own life and he didn't necessarily care what happened to it. After the incident, Mom and Devin agreed that he would go to rehab and hopefully work through some of the stuff that he'd avoided about my dad. Devin ended up going to the same facility our dad went to, Hazelden. When he got there, he immediately refused any of the possible help there might have been after meeting a 16-year-old who'd been there for marijuana use. His rich parents in California had sent him there because of his, quote, marijuana addiction. And this pissed Devin off, and he was vocal about it. Because he felt like, okay, marijuana is not a reason to send your kid to a rehab facility with people who have serious addiction, like crack addiction, addictions to heroin, like adults who have real problems, not your 16-year-old kid and you don't know how to parent them. And he said so. And he said to the directors of the rehab facility, why did you let this guy in? This kid needs parenting. He doesn't need to be here. We have serious problems here. You know, this isn't, why are you accepting this family's money because they can pay these high fees when you know he doesn't need to be here? This is not an appropriate place for this 16-year-old kid. The therapist didn't appreciate Devin saying all this in front of the other patients, but Devin had a point. Talk about insulting on several different levels to have a literal kid thrown in with a group of adults addicted to pain pills and crack cocaine, when really this 16-year-old just needed some actual parenting. But that's not ultimately what got Devin kicked out of Hazelden. Oh, no, it isn't. Dear old Emma from his former stomping grounds is not willing to give up on Devin. And for whatever reason, she decided to send him $400 worth of pills in the mail. Well, you can imagine this package didn't go over very well, and he got kicked out. I don't know why in the world Emma did that, and nobody else knows either. I mean, there's a couple of reasons she could have done that. One, she was jealous of the fact that he was getting help. And when somebody starts to claw their way back into coherency and doing the right thing, and then all their clingers-on friends who aren't really ready to change their lifestyle want to pull you back in so they don't have to change, could have been something like that. Or maybe she really thought that he was being forced to go there against his will, and she thought that it would be a loving act to send him a care package full of the things they loved best. I don't know, but Emma needs to get out of the picture because Emma is a problem. Even though Devin had no hand in the package, he was kicked out. They ended his stay at Hazelden immediately, and he was soon back home with my mom. It wasn't long after that when Devin found himself in the hospital on a 72-hour hold. Generally, they do this when someone is suicidal or a threat to themselves and their own well-being. Devin wasn't suicidal, but when he was found passed out again, he was taken to the hospital and kept for evaluation. He said while he was there, it was easier than ever to get the pills he liked. All he had to do was walk up to the nurse's station and claim he was feeling extreme anxiety, and within a minute he had the benzos he wanted. He didn't even have to go to a drug dealer. He got them in the hospital. There really is truly no drug dealer more prolific than a tired doctor. A weary nurse, they'll hand you anything. He says that this is often the case in our very sick society. The legal drug dealers, doctors, and pharmacists are all able to profit off of it and enable drug users, and nobody bats an eye. I saw my own eyes working in medicine. I can't tell you how many active duty members I personally helped take care of who are addicted to pain pills, and as sure as the sun rises, they would come in every few weeks to refill their meds with some new ailment. They would try to get an ADHD and or depression diagnosis for the benzos, Adderall, Xanax. They immediately got access to almost any drug they wanted. All because of legal drug dealers who are supposed to look out for their patients. Eventually, once the patient was confronted about their overuse of pills, if they were confronted, then the patient would hit up the emergency room a few times before eventually finding themselves on the street scoring pills. I mean, to all the doctors out there just shelling out pills like there's no tomorrow, what'd y'all do before pills? Are you trying to say that no doctor ever could have ever helped anybody? But it's like the way they hand out pills, it's like there's no other medicine that we could possibly imagine doing. This is like the holy grail now. It's like, oh, you have a pain, an ache, is something bothering you? Pill, 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 pill. Well, what were y'all doing before this? Before y'all decided to medicate everybody into incoherency? What was the plan before? Can we get back to some of that? I want to be very clear that some people truly do need these drugs. I've taken care of those people too. But the medical system is so easy to game for these drugs, and I saw it over and over and over again. If you're able to make lifestyle changes to better your situation, please do that before you take a pill. Amen. Well, even with the perk of free drugs, whenever Devin wanted to, he didn't want to be there. This is bullshit. You guys are holding me here against my will, he told the doctor. Careful, the doctor said. No, I'm serious. You guys are taking what I say out of context, using it against me. You do this all the time around here. I see it everywhere. I don't want to be here. Watch it. I'm serious, the doctor said again. No, you guys take a stand-up comedian who makes a joke about suicide. You'd claim he's a threat to himself, and you'd hold him against his will. Be surprised if you guys haven't done that before. All right, you're staying, the doctor said. Not long after that, Devin was at a state-run rehab center with a bunch of other people who didn't want to be in rehab. The men Devin played cards with were real-life criminals, and most of them were gang members. At least that's what they said. Hell's Angels and whatnot. And Devin didn't know if half the stories he was hearing were true or if these people were just posturing. Because, of course, that's what you're going to do. When you get into prison, you better come up with a story. And sometimes when you come out of prison, you forget that you don't need to keep telling the same stories. So he wasn't really sure if these people were really as hard as they tried to let you know. James was there for drug charges, and after a few days of playing cards with him, Devin started to think that maybe James's brain was stuck in some sort of an acid trip. He wasn't as big of a space cadet as his old friend Tree in Colorado, but his stories were over the top, and James seemed to believe every word was true. And then there was Dream. Devin said he thought Dream was the only other sane person in the whole program, and because of that, he talked to him every day during and after cards. As he got to know him, he found that Dream was part of the Black Guerrilla family. The BGF was a gang that started in prison in the 1960s. It started as a way to, quote, promote black power, quote, maintain dignity in prison, and, quote, overthrow the United States government. According to Dream, he'd seen murders where men who crossed the gang had their manhood cut off and put in their own mouths before they were shot in the head. He was explaining how hard the gang was after Devin had asked him what it was that he had gotten to rehab center for. Devin didn't know if Dream said it to intimidate or just as a matter of fact. They were in a rehab therapy facility, so Devin thought maybe he was just sharing because sharing what's on your mind was what they were supposed to be doing. Apparently he trusted Dave enough to tell him what had messed him up since childhood. So, was it like that in prison too? Devin asked one day when they were sharing war stories. Oh yeah, guys were stabbed for looking at each other wrong. But that's where they become your family, and you look out for each other. You need each other or you're alone. Devin couldn't believe some of the stories. What about you, little white boy from white-ass Minnesota? You ever stabbed a motherfucker? Dream said, laughing. You'd be surprised, man, Devin said, going along with Dream's razzing. Yeah, right, you're lying, Dream said. I had to, man. If I didn't, she would have killed her. Holy shit, you serious? Damn, Devin, I would have never guessed. Who was it? My mom. And your dad? Yep, Devin said. Shit. See, you know what prison is like then. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Devin didn't know why he had just told Dream that. Usually he kept everything about Dad to himself. It felt good to tell Dream about it. In a weird way, they were similar. And Devin felt like Dream might actually understand him. Hell, if half the stuff he'd said was true, then he definitely was able to understand him. So let me ask you this. He's in prison, right? Devin nodded. Why in the actual hell are you here with a bunch of real-life felons? Some of these motherfuckers here did worse stuff than your daddy. You're a damn hero for saving your mom. And you here, like a criminal. Devin thought for a bit and finally replied, I told you. I got kicked out of Hazelden because Emma sent me a bag of pills. Man, shut the hell up. You know exactly what I'm saying. You shouldn't be here. You're 22. Get the fuck out of here. Shouldn't I say the same thing about you? About anyone here? Dream shook his head. In my head, I didn't have a choice. I had nobody. And if I had to live a life without seeing some of the things I'd seen, I would. Sounds like you got people who love you. And that's all I'm saying. You want to be like your daddy in prison? In the middle of our conversation, the elevator door opened and inside laid a man, seemingly trying to stand up but unable to. Help, said the man. Ah, hell no, Dream said. Yo, Kendrick down again, where the nurse is at. Devin looked over and saw a man in the elevator covered in his own waste and blood. Hey, new girl, careful, he got AIDS, someone said to the nurse as she ran to the elevator. It was one of the more grotesque things Devin had seen since he'd arrived, but it wasn't surprising. During the last few days at the facility, Devin thought about what Dream had said. Maybe he didn't belong at one of these places. Maybe he did. The thing that struck him most was what he'd said last. Want to be like your daddy? That pissed Devin off. It's the last thing he wanted to be compared to. What the hell am I doing? Devin asked himself. Now, we're going to make a transition. We're going to talk about Desmond, and his time in the military is over. He did it for 4 years, but he never took any time off. So he's got 2 months saved up so that he can get out of the military like 2 months early before his contract's even out and use up all that vacation time. His plan, which he admits was a little bit loosey-goosey, was that he was going to go stay with his mom and his stepdad, Brent, for a few months while he finished up his new book. Now, of course, you recall from previous chapters that he was a prolific writer and had written screenplays and short stories and novels while he was in the military. But there was one particular project that he was working on. He was writing this book, and he had big hopes and dreams for this book. So his main priority was to finish the book, market the book, and then hopefully become an author. And at the time, he was also going to drive out to Colorado with an old high school friend to see if he wanted to live there. He'd heard from Devin that it was a beautiful place, although Devin didn't tell him all the unbeautiful things that were happening. But he thought maybe that would be a possibility, a place to settle. My plan in Colorado was then to check out some of the schools in the area. And that was if my book didn't sell. I had a great feeling about my idea, and I thought that it would get bought up right away. It was inspired by one of my favorite books, Catch-22, a satire on the military during World War II. And my idea was to write a new satire about the modern military. So instead of paying attention in those TAP classes, he was thinking about his book. He was daydreaming about how one day he was going to become this well-known author. He was thinking about all the things he wanted to do creativity-wise, all the outlets he had spent his time on as a kid, and thinking, finally now I might have the time and the bandwidth to get some of those things done I wanted. He says, I thought about my story and what else I needed to write to fix the plot holes. Then I thought about what I would do after my book was a success. I would then start working on my next book, hopefully have some skits and funny videos produced, all while hiring my brothers and Chase and Dylan if they still wanted to be a part of what we'd started building. I was more motivated than ever to make everything a reality. And he really had believed with all his heart that this book was going to do super well. Quite frankly, this book is so good, it's hard to imagine that the other book he wrote would be anything but a success because he clearly knows how to write a book. So I can understand why he had a lot of faith in what he had done. He says, I wouldn't have been working on my book with 2 months left in the Air Force if it hadn't been for my friend Daniel. I was going to write the entire thing after I got out of the military. But when I told Daniel about it a few months earlier, he asked me, why are you waiting? If you want to do it, just start now. I always liked running my ideas past Daniel. He was creative as well, and usually saw my ideas from a different angle, adding to them and forcing me to think about them differently, which generally made them better. He had met Daniel and Daniel's wife around 2008. He writes, my mom had always been the more the merrier type person, and whenever there were new employees at her clinic, she tried to make sure that they felt welcome, especially if they were moving from out of town. Daniel and Janelle moved from the Twin Cities, and it would have been one of their first years away from the cities during Thanksgiving. Mom invited them to our house. Desmond says that after dinner, he and his brothers showed Daniel a bunch of their home movies, and Daniel thought they were hilarious. And his mindset was exactly like theirs. His humor was the same. He liked the concepts that they were coming up with, and he had a lot of other ideas too. A few weeks after Thanksgiving, Daniel asked us to come out and help with some painting and odd jobs at the house that they had just built. While we were there, Daniel told me about a book idea he had. We brainstormed on it, and I told him about a few of the ideas I had for movies and other funny skits. From that point on, whenever I had an idea, I'd call him and run it past him. I once heard that for every good idea, there are 1,000 bad ideas, and in order to find those good ideas, you need to throw everything at the wall with other writers and bring no judgment to the table. Telling someone, that's dumb, or what an idiotic idea, creates a cancerous collaboration. If the idea is worth exploring, the conversation continues. If it's not, the conversation moves into another topic. And that's how we operated. So he and Daniel got along for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons that they got along was that they had a shared military experience as well. Daniel had been in the military. And so as Desmond was getting out of the military, he called Daniel and asked him to sort of help him figure out that transition. Although our experiences were different, the institutionalization of the mind is the same, and sometimes the transition can be tough, even without any combat experience. If you do have combat experience, the transition can be excruciating. Well, he says that he took his trip to Colorado and decided that it wasn't really the right move for him. So then he spent the next few months at his mom's. He says that he finished his 75,000-word novel. It was the hardest thing he had ever done to date. And he was really proud of it, proud as hell of it, of what he'd written, of what he'd accomplished. He'd written stories before, a lot of stories, but he had never written a novel of this length and of this much worth. He says, I felt it was a mental marathon getting up and writing 1,000 words a day minimum and then cleansing my mind in the evening to do it again the next day. When I finished, I submitted my manuscript to 10 agents and publishers every single day for 2 months. I created a Twitter account. I did everything I could to tweet at other authors and agents to get their attention and hopefully garner interest in my book. It was now May, and I received only 2 responses. One agent requested a chapter, and another requested 3 chapters. They both passed on it. I was absolutely deflated. For months, this was my only plan, all in on it. My mind was engulfed in this project. It was all I cared about, and in the end, it was shit. Nobody wanted it. So, can you imagine where you would be right now? Okay, he's gotten out of the military. His plan to become a writer, the thing he's been working this whole time for, right? I mean, it's not like he was just twiddling his thumbs being like, I hope one day I'm a writer. But he was really putting all that effort in. He was reading, which is like, you want to be a writer, you better pick up a book, right? Because no one's ever going to want to read your sorry-ass writing when it's just you in your own head and you don't even know how to put words together. So not only is he, committing himself to writing, 500, 1,000 words a day, he's also reading across a wide genre. So his vocabulary is being enriched. The way he expresses himself, his articulation is coming together even without him having to try and to think about it, simply because he's reading. So he's done all this work. Now he writes this book. It's like been the most arduous experience of his life, and no one wants it. Once reality set in about my creative endeavors, that maybe I wasn't supposed to be creating anything at all, and that maybe I was just a delusional dreamer, the world around me started to come back into focus. I was officially 2 months out of the military. I had no job, no plan, no book to sell anymore. I began to actually miss the military. Beau had joined the Navy the year before, and for a little bit I thought about rejoining and getting stationed near him. Thought that'd be pretty cool. But Daniel was like, You say this, but it's just that you don't know what else to do with your life. Don't get dragged back into that. You got out for a reason, And he knew the cycle. You go in, you get institutionalized, you have structure, then you get out, and without that structure, everything does feel a little loosey-goosey, and it doesn't exactly feel as comfortable as it used to feel. And somebody's not making your decisions for you, and you actually have to know exactly what you're going to do, and you have to have a plan, and your success or failure rides on you in a way that it doesn't when you're in the military. In the real world, you don't have the parents of the military telling you what to do and sort of making sure that everything turns out okay for you. It's a discombobulating experience to get out of the military. And I speak from experience. You want to run right back into the safety of what you once knew once the real world hits. And I don't know anybody who's ever gotten out of the military who didn't at least play around with the idea of maybe we should go back. Daniel talks him out of going back to the Air Force, but he's got to figure out what to do next. He says that instead of rejoining, I decided to move into a house in the cities with two of my best high school friends while I attended the University of Minnesota for accounting. After my failed book, I'd pretty much thrown in the towel in the dream room and any possibility of film school. I realized that I had to become a cog in the corporate wheel or be a lazy turd that would never provide for his future family, and I wanted a family more than anything one day. I could spend months writing another one of my book ideas only to have it not sell like the last one and be right in the same position or choose the cubicle. I chose the cubicle route out of fear of never being successful in the creative world. It's shameful looking back on it. I don't know if it's shameful. I mean, it's honest, but propelling yourself into the unknown is unbelievably daunting, especially if you've already tried something. Like, he worked his tail off writing that book and then trying to promote that book with other publishers and then just seeing it not get off the ground. It's it would be very difficult to rally yourself for a second stint of that. And everybody had always been telling him, you need to go to college. He did go to the Air Force. The Air Force will pay for it now. So it's all right, well, I guess that's what I should do. It's very hard not to imagine what life could be like if not for figuring out which cog you're supposed to be. It's very hard to think outside the box about what you could possibly do other than what everybody else is doing. And it's really hard to imagine that doing your own thing could ever be called success. Because we define success so often by what other people are doing. That doctor is successful, that lawyer is successful. Those are successful jobs. Is it successful to go be a YouTuber? Is it successful to go to film school? Is it there's such a negative connotation towards making creativity your livelihood. Probably because creative projects are subjective. If you need to go get well, you'll go to a doctor. Everyone agrees about that. If you want to look at something beautiful, everyone doesn't agree on whether that painting is beautiful or not. And so there is this idea that there isn't as much inherent worth in creativity as there is in something as solid and substantial as, say, medicine, because we all need that. But do we all need that picture you painted? Do we all need that video you made? Do we all need that film that you edited? And it's such a pity, because the reality is we need beauty and creativity and incredible content as much as we need the doctor. And sometimes we need the content more than we needed the doctor. Sometimes we need to see something beautiful, something inspiring, something honest, more than I need to go see the doctor who's just going to give me a pill. I'm getting on a tangent here. It's late. It's midnight. So I'm talking crazy. But I hate that we live in a society that gives us such a singular and linear way to be successful, instead of saying, find out what you're good at and find out how you can use that to benefit your society and benefit your community and benefit your family, and then go for that, and that's what success can be. All right. I'm on a tangent. Sorry. Back to the story. He says, when I started attending classes again and living in the cities, I was forced back into the social spotlight. And when that happened, I started experiencing something I hadn't experienced yet. Every place I went, I expected to turn the corner and run into my father. Every place. When I went to Target, the grocery store, the gas station, I was constantly in a state of paranoia. What would I say to him? What would he say to me? Eventually, I started to withdraw again. I had researched my professors before signing up for spring classes to see which ones had mandatory attendance and which ones didn't. And I took any fully online class that I could. This way, I wouldn't have to go to the campus anymore. You know, as a side note, can you imagine how terrifying that would be? Have you ever, been in a long-term serious relationship and then you break up with that person and you both are still living in the same city and you're worried that you're going to run into the person because you both are seeing, going to the same spots that you always did. And now what if you're going to see him, and the anxiety of that? And that's not even a big deal. It's just somebody that you were dating and it didn't work out. I'm not saying it wasn't sad, but nobody tried to kill anybody. Can you imagine the fear of being in the city? Your father is now out of prison and you might run into him and you still don't know exactly where he is mentally. Is he going to be crazy? Is he going to rage out? Is he going to approach you and ask you some uncomfortable questions? Who's to say? Who's to know? I would be terrified. I would be I need to move to another city just so I can stop being worried I'm going to run into that guy. Now, let's talk about his love life, shall we? As he said, what he really, really wanted in life was to get married. He wanted to have kids. He wanted a family. He wanted to find somebody that he could do life with, somebody who could share his experiences, and somebody who could, with what we all want. But how was he going to find somebody? And he made the decision that he needed to get on the dating apps. He needed the apps, and it wasn't to hook up. And he says, in his estimation, there's a big misconception that people are just on apps so that they can just fool around and be dumb. And he says that was not his intention. But where else was he going to meet girls? He wasn't going to hang out in bars because he wasn't really necessarily interested in what he might find there. He wasn't going to church at the time. So to him, this was the next logical step. Get on the apps, you go on as many dates as you can. If you like the person, good. See you again. If you don't, you don't. But what other alternative was there? He says that every girl he went on a date with, he did the same thing to avoid the conversation about his real dad. He said that he just told them that his dad was a machinist and he left it there. Problem solved. But he didn't like it because it felt dishonest. So on one date, he tried explaining what had happened to his dad in 2007. He says, I didn't know how she would react or what I should even tell her. As I started, I could sense my heart rate rising and my breaths getting deep. I felt like Christmas Eve morning when I was in Japan. When I realized I had little beads of sweat on my forehead, I stopped the conversation. I tried to change the subject altogether. I just told her that maybe we talk more about it later and that I didn't really want to scare her off. It felt humiliating reacting like that in front of her, in public no less. She wanted to go on another date, but that was the last one we went on. I felt myself regressing back to my shell. Instead of going to class with the intention of getting my degree, I just took classes to get my GI Bill money to live on while I trained to rejoin the Air Force as a para-rescueman. So he has shifted his ideas, right? So remember, he was like, I want to go back to the Air Force. And then Daniel was like, you don't. And then he decided, okay, maybe I just need to go be a cog in the machine. But then he was like, no, I don't. Do I really want to be an accountant? Is that really what I want out of my life? And he decided that he needed a plan. He needed to go back. He felt like he needed something that was going to challenge him on every conceivable level. And he decided that he wanted to go back to the Air Force as a pararescueman. He said that pararescuemen are even more badass than Navy SEALs, and that Hollywood has led you to believe that Navy SEALs is where it's at, but it's not. That if the Navy SEALs are in trouble, it's the pararescuemen who come and help you out. He said their motto, that others may live, was something that he desperately wanted to employ in his own life. That the goals and ambition and the hard work that came with being a pararescueman was something that he just felt like his soul was calling him to do. So he said, I needed to do this for myself. I needed to have this kind of purpose in my life. And I told myself I needed something to be proud of. And that was it. I knew I was very capable of it physically. I got 100% on my PT test, which is very rare in the Air Force. And mentally, I excelled in all of my other training. So I knew I was a perfect fit. In my room, I got a whiteboard. I kept track of my personal best times for swimming, running, push-ups, and sit-ups, and I started training. I swam and ran every day and increased my strength in the evenings lifting weights at the gym with my roommates. I emailed a recruiter and I talked to him about finding others training in my area who I could connect with. I was dead set on rejoining, and I plan on doing it within the year. He says at that time, his only real social life was fishing and golfing with his roommates, and then hanging out with Daniel. So he started actually even working with Daniel. So Daniel worked for this event company. They would travel all over the country, setting up events, moving around the props during the event, breaking it all down, and then returning to Minnesota. He did one of these events with Daniel, and then after that, they wanted him to keep working for them. And so after a while, he started doing that with them. And he says that it was the first time since being in the military that he felt like he was part of a team. And it wasn't arduous work or anything, but it just, you got to travel and you worked with the team. And he said that it was really, it was a great experience. He loved the job. But one time something really strange happened, and it really opened up the doors of possibility for him to consider that possibly he might be dealing with something similar. When we were driving through Memphis, I started noticing that Daniel wasn't quite acting right. He was quiet, he seemed almost paranoid, and when I tried to talk to him, he was often unresponsive. It's like his mind wasn't even in the same place. He was in La La Land. Dude, what the hell is going on with you? I've never seen you like this. I said, you gotta drive. I can't drive, Daniel said. This was very abnormal. We'd driven to all four corners of the country in Daniel's truck hauling stuff. This was the first time he'd ever asked me to drive. I drove from Memphis to the Florida Panhandle, where we got a hotel room that evening. And once we checked in, Daniel didn't say a word. He went and he laid in his bed with his shoes on and just stared into the abyss. And Desmond's like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why he was acting like this. I'd never seen him act like this. So he called Janelle, Daniel's wife, and was like, what's going on with this? She said, well, he does sometimes have these bouts of anxiety. And if it gets really bad, you're going to need to bring him to an emergency room. The entire time they're in Florida, it's not getting better. He says Daniel was a little more with it this day and was able to drive us to Miami. But when we finally got there, his mind was even worse than the night before. He was mute. Catatonic almost, just sitting there in his own mind. Finally, another group member and I convinced him to go to the emergency room, and after we dropped him off, I didn't see him for the rest of the day. The next day, aside from breakfast, I didn't see him either. He skipped the event completely and stayed in his room and slept. Finally, Daniel is able to bestir himself and come back to his senses. And Desmond says, are you all right, man? What the hell is going on? You don't have to tell me, but it's pretty scary, dude. I was worried something was seriously wrong. I even texted Janelle a bunch asking what I should do, I said. Yeah, I'll be all right. It just happens every once in a while. It's not like that usually, but it happens. What exactly was happening? I literally thought you were stroking out. Back when we were in Memphis, I asked Janelle if I should bring you to the hospital. No, it's not a stroke, thankfully. They diagnosed me a while back with PTSD from some stuff in the Army. Damn, does that happen to you often? I asked. No, not crazy often, but when it happens, I can't get out of it. Like when you were driving, my mind was just racing. I couldn't hear you talking. It wasn't computing. I was overthinking about everything. It's weird that it happened over 20 years ago, but it still sticks with me like it was yesterday. I didn't say it, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. Usually I had to fall asleep and hope that I'd wake up without it still rolling. What he described is how I felt. I didn't ask Daniel about what had happened that caused him to go into these zombie modes. I figured if he wanted to say anything about it, he would, and vice versa. He didn't know my family when everything happened with my dad, but I know he knew of it in summary, and he never tried to prod things from me, and I appreciated that. But having experienced Daniel having one of these episodes, it made it easier for Desmond to broach the subject with his own PTSD struggles. Up until this point, he had really denied that it was a possibility that he could even be struggling with this. I mean, he didn't even play with the idea. It was just truly all he kept thinking was like, quit feeling sorry for yourself, man up. Like, this is a weakness. This is disgusting. Stop acting like this. Stop feeling this way. And he berated himself for it, thinking that he couldn't possibly have PTSD. But he opened up to Daniel on the way back from their trip. And after Daniel heard some of the things that Desmond was telling him, Daniel was like, I think this is PTSD. Like, I think you need to stop saying that that's not what this is. Daniel said, I see a therapist for this stuff, right? She's pretty cool. Sometimes we just sit and chat about whatever. It seems to help quite a bit, honestly. I'm not sitting here telling you that that's what you need. It's just FYI, but she told me this old story about an Indian tribe way back before we knew what PTSD and shell-shock soldiers were. These Indian warriors would go off to battle and do and see God knows what. And when they could come back, they weren't right. They'd wake up at night seeing ghosts and their wives couldn't figure out what was going on. The weirder thing was, when these warriors went back out with their fellow warriors to hunt or train, they were fine. Almost like nothing happened. No ghosts, nothing. You know that saying, blood is thicker than water? Daniel asked. I nodded. A lot of people think that means blood of family, but it doesn't. The saying refers to blood on the battlefield being thicker than water in the womb. We sat in the parking lot for another minute. Daniel finally broke the silence. Let's go get some tacos. I hopped out of the truck and walked into the restaurant, forgetting all about the possibility of running into my dad. So there's strength in having people you can talk to. You know, being able to finally open up, being able to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm struggling too, you know? We do ourselves and everybody around us a colossal misservice when we refuse to be honest about where we're actually at. It doesn't help us, and it doesn't help the people around us, because they've got stuff they want to talk about too. So you being all stoic and I'm not going to say anything makes them have to be all stoic and they're not going to say anything. Why can't we all just be humans together? You've got your struggles, I got my struggles. I'm not going to judge you, you're not going to judge me. Like, let's just talk. You know, and that's what we are so desperately needing in this society in which everybody's constantly posting all their highlight reel and nobody's being honest and nobody's being real. And everybody says they are by being like hyper descriptive of all of their therapy sessions and, bleeding all over you all the time. But I'm not talking about, I am not talking about making every moment all about you and your pain. But what I'm saying is coming into a situation and coming into friendship with, I'm here to hear what you have to say. And thank you for being here to hear what I have to say. And just like bearing each other's burdens, isn't that what we're called to do? To bear each other's burdens? And I just loved the fact that he had this relationship with Daniel that kind of drew him into the understanding that, hey, maybe I got some stuff I got to work out here. And it's really okay. Because Daniel does too, Chapter 13, spring of 2016, he says that he was definitely preparing to become a pararescueman. Like, he'd given college a chance for a second go. And it just wasn't happening, He's taking these classes so he can use his GI Bill. But the classes are full of these 18-year-old kids that he cannot connect with. And it's just like, what am I doing? It's time to move on to greener pastures. Time to move on to something that actually asks something of me. Time to move on to where I can actually have an impact and I'm actually giving back and I'm actually doing something that tests my will and my perseverance and my grit. And can I stand up to the hard things in life? And can I be somebody's savior? Can I sacrifice myself for the benefit of somebody else? Because that's a life in which I am not always giving in to what I want, but in which my entire life is revolving around the betterment of other people. So he was all on board to be the pararescueman. In his mind's eye, that's what needed to be done. But he says, one thing I was disappointed about with my potentially leaving again was just missing Devin, who was relocating to the cities with his fiance, who would have been living really close to me. After Devin completed his stint in the state-run rehab facility, he moved to Thief River Falls to be around the rest of our family and go to school. He completely cut ties with Emma and told himself that he was never going back to one of those places again. He chose to make changes in his life, and as soon as he did, his life changed forever, for the better. While he was in Thief River Falls, he met a girl named Uma, who he quickly fell in love with. They would end up moving out to Dickinson, North Dakota together, where they got engaged. Soon, they would be moving to the cities, which meant that we'd get to hang out again. Finally. If I didn't end up rejoining the Air Force. We hadn't lived in the same place since I'd left for college 8 years earlier. Devin and Uma were getting married that summer. So Devin was the first of them to get married. Then Bo gets married to a girl named Haley, who he'd fallen in love with when he was serving in Boston. And he says, I was the last to get married, but it wouldn't be much longer after. So, who does he meet? Let's talk romance here. Finally, he was on the apps. And one day he gets a message in his inbox from a girl named Tessa. And Tessa, this is very clever. She wrote to him. She says, wow, I'm so glad you survived that paper cut. It must have been terrifying. How long were you in that coma for? She was responding to my profile description where I detailed that I was a paper cut survivor. Stupid, I know. I had a good reason for putting that joke in there, to attract a girl with a similar sense of humor. As corny as it was, Tessa thought it was funny. She likes to say that I bailed on her 2 times when we had dinner scheduled, but the 3rd time was the charm. We met at a sushi restaurant in Uptown, a neighborhood close to Minneapolis. I thought she was gorgeous. And when we started talking, I really liked her personality too. She laughed about my stupid joke in my profile, and I told her about writing satirical articles with Daniel in our publication called The Garlic, and she thought that was funny too. Since she liked that, I told her about everything else I like to create. I learned her family had a little hobby farm growing up, which reminded me of my grandparents' farm. She was into sports like I was, and was even a collegiate diver, a good one, going to nationals. And she had a similar sense of humor. I could tell halfway through our date that I wanted to see her again. I knew for sure I was going to ask her out again when the topic of our parents came up. And instead of ignoring the subject or lying to her and telling her what my stepdad did for work, I told her the truth. I told her my dad was not a part of my life, and I told her why. I didn't go into crazy detail because it was the first date, but I told her, and I was fine. No beads of sweat or embarrassing moments. I was comfortable enough around this girl to tell her the truth. Can you imagine? That is huge. Because it's not like he hadn't been dating girls before. It's not like this is the first girl that he was able to get a date with and like he summoned the courage. This guy had been dating girls like bam, 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 bam. It would appear. And he had tried to tell them the story and couldn't. But there was something about Tessa that called out in him the ability to be honest. A keeper. Well, before we left the table, I tried to get the next date scheduled. And just a few days later, she came over to my house where I made her stir fry and we had a fire. I had already fallen head over heels for Tessa. I was so confident in wanting to be with her that I invited her to Devin's wedding, even though we'd been dating for only a few weeks by that time. She fit right in with my family at the wedding, and that's when I knew I wanted to be with her forever. When I first met Tessa, I told her about my idea of pararescue, and we even went to work out together at the pool. I did my swimming drills, and after a while I started to think that maybe my idea was a terrible one. If I wanted Tessa to be my wife, going through a 2-year training pipeline and getting deployed every 6 months wasn't very conducive to a marriage. He'd seen firsthand how the marriages failed in the military. And how could he invite a woman into his life and then say, see you every 6 months and hope it works out? So now he had a new plan. He was going to have to come up with something else because he wants Tessa in his life. And it's not like she was saying, well, if you take this path, I'm not going to be with you. But he didn't want to be that kind of husband that wasn't around for his wife. In an online comment thread, I'd heard about air traffic control and how their training process worked, that it didn't require a degree and you could make almost $200,000 a year once you were done with training. All you had to do was get through the training, which is easier said than done. I applied, and a few months later I got accepted into the training program for a center. Most people think of the tower when they hear air traffic control. A center is who your pilot is talking to when you're 30,000 feet in the air and coming into land. I didn't know a lot about being a controller, but they said that I'd learn it all at training in Oklahoma City. And there was now a couple of problems with this job. Number 1, the training was about 6 months. It was in another state. Number 2, when I finished, I had no control of where I would end up working, kind of like the military. Number 3, I wasn't guaranteed a job. I would have to complete the training and the washout rate was almost 50%. I wasn't as worried about number 3. I knew if I studied and put in the time, I could do it. It wasn't stupid. But I was worried about number 1 and 2. I've been dating Tessa for about 6 months and I wanted to be with her. But he was afraid that if he asked her to move with him after only dating 6 months, he was going to for sure scare her away. I finally thought, screw it. I have to ask her what she thinks. If she says no, then I'll find a job somewhere else. I knew I could get a job being a job recruiter or something if I really had to. So he asks her. We were driving on Highway 169 to our favorite sushi restaurant, and I said to her, so I got accepted into the air traffic control program, but the training is in Oklahoma City for about 6 months. Oh my gosh, congrats, Tessa said. 6 months isn't too long. Will you be able to come home on the weekends if you want? Well, I was hoping I wouldn't have to do that. I want you to come with me. She sat and thought about it for a few seconds. Okay, she said. She worked it out with her job to work remotely, and a few months later, Tessa and I moved to Oklahoma City where I could train to be an air traffic controller. Getting pretty serious. Now, here's the deal. He's in a relationship that is very serious. He has marriage on the mind. It didn't take him long to decide this was going to be the girl for him. And not that they got married like the next day, but he knew that she was his girl. That's who he wanted to do life with. But the problem still was that this situation with his dad was something he still felt like he couldn't talk about. I mean, he had told her more than he had told anybody else, but it just felt like this thing that was just sort of like this fog that he couldn't get past, and this thing that he just couldn't articulate to her, and that he didn't really want to articulate to her. Although I was no longer paranoid about running into my dad, and I wasn't having public panic attacks when I flashed back to old memories, I still hadn't dealt with them, and I wasn't quite sure how to. Talking about it with Daniel and Tessa seemed to help a lot, but not fully. I still felt a cloud in my heart. I told Tessa a summary about my dad being in prison and why he'd ended up there, but I still didn't fully open up. One night at my house before I moved to Oklahoma, she asked me about it, and I tried to tell her about it that night, but I struggled. I only gave her snapshots, and I answered her questions with minimal detail. I was still so angry with my dad when I thought about everything. He constantly found himself having these mental arguments with his dad, constantly angry with his dad for what he had done and for the life that he now was leading with the absence of a good father. And it just felt like, why? Why would you do this? I'm now with an amazing woman named Tessa, and I'm supposed to have you there for advice. How do I ask her to marry me when I'm ready? Should I ask her, Dad? Should I let her pick up the ring, or should I just get what I think she'll like? Is this job I'm applying for a good idea? Instead, I'm trying to figure out how to talk about this BS and hopefully not scare her away. Screw you, Dad, for not being here for me right now. The thing, too, that had really put a pall over his life after his dad did that to his mom was that now he came to really doubt God's love for him. What kind of a God would be okay with this? What kind of a God would be okay with Dana being killed the way she was in that horrific car accident? What kind of a God could sanction little Jamal having been hit by that car because he ran away from his mom in a parking lot, and some old man loses control of a car and runs right over that little kid? In his mind, he could not rectify what kind of a God would let Sergeant Smith die in that helicopter accident and make his wife now a widow, and he's only 30 years old. The question of why kept him from God and had kept him from God for a long time. He says, the only time I went to church in that 10-year span was when I had to go with Mom and Grandma, and in basic training so I could get out of the barracks and away from the Hulk Sergeant White for a few hours a week. Other than that, I completely cut God out of my life. But even though I cut God out of my life, his messages still found a way to get through to me exactly when I needed them, whether I recognized them as divine or not. You guys, I love this. I am loving this right now. Because isn't that so like God? That we may have let our hand go limp in his, but he never let go of our hand. He says that one evening he and Tessa were watching a movie called The Shack. They'd moved to Oklahoma City. He was starting his air traffic control job. He says, I found myself connecting to the main character. His tragedy was horrific, but like him, I was questioning my faith after something bad hit my family. He was angry with God just like I was, and as the movie goes on, his relationship with his father is revealed. He hated his father when he was drunk, so much so that he poisoned him when he was a kid to make it stop. He's forced to empathize with his father and to see what he'd gone through as a kid. This made me think about my own father and his relationship with his family. My dad grew up with an alcoholic father and a gambling mother. He used to tell us stories about the times he and his brother got into trouble. They were close in age, just like Devin and me. One time when they were 5 and 6, they piled up some socks and underwear and lit it on fire. Just like stupid kid stuff, They weren't trying to cause a problem. Their punishment was getting burned with a lighter to teach them a lesson. My dad would also tell us about how he played baseball and hockey growing up, but his parents only ever came to one game and his dad was shit-faced and screaming from the stands until he was finally removed from the arena. On Thanksgiving one year, his dad got so mad and drunk that he grabbed the turkey right off the table and threw it out into the yard in the middle of dinner. When Dad was 20, his brother got into a car accident that left him with permanent brain damage. And just like that, the brother he had known was gone forever. A few years later, his mother died. And so for the first time, maybe ever, at least for the first time in this book, Desmond is having to be confronted with the humanity of his own father. Now, I will say that this entire time he has loved his father because his father wasn't all bad. He had great memories with his dad, and also the man was his father. He wanted him in his life, but he didn't want the drunk in his life, the one who made everybody walk on eggshells, the one who made his mom cry, the one who scared he and his brothers. He didn't want that guy, but he wanted his dad. He wanted his dad to get better. But until this part of the story, we have never heard him consider the fact that his father was the way he was for specific reasons. We've heard him say, why did my dad do this? Well, like, what was the deal with it? But now we get at least a small snapshot of what his dad was coming from. And you have to think, if his dad grew up with people burning him with a lighter as a punishment, he probably thought he was doing pretty well as a dad. And I think, good parenting is relative to what we experienced. If we experience some horrific thing, then we can give ourselves a really awful pass for bad parenting because it isn't as bad as what we experienced. But the whole time he's watching this movie, he's having a regeneration of the spirit regarding his father. He says, as I watched the movie, I thought about Dad's childhood and the hardships that he dealt with, and I started to cry. None of this justified my dad's actions. But for the first time, I began to empathize with my father's own pain. I thought maybe this was why he'd done some of the stuff that he did while we were growing up. I tried so hard to hold it in next to Tessa, but I couldn't. And then the movie talked about forgiveness. I had heard so many people talk about forgiveness, and I understood what it meant, but I didn't know what it felt like to truly forgive. I saw this character going through his process of forgiveness, and I felt like it was showing me what I had to do in my own life. Holding on to this hate for my dad had absolutely destroyed me, and it had prevented me from both growing personally and in my relationships. I needed to figure out how to forgive my dad. Just say it out loud, said the character. I had removed God from my life, but his message of forgiveness had still found me when I needed it most. When I needed a mentor and a friend to guide me through my times in Japan, I got one in Denson. When I'd moved home, given up on my creative hobbies and fallen into another hole, ready to leave for the military again, I desperately needed a friend, and I got one in Daniel, who helped me to deal with my flashbacks and memories. When I decided I was going to keep this stuff about my dad buried away while dating, and I needed a woman I felt comfortable enough around to open up to, I got one in my future wife, Tessa. When I was truly ready to forgive and needed to hear the message of forgiveness, I got it in a movie. I never said it out loud, but over the next few months, I said, I forgive you, Dad, in my head every day. And slowly, I felt a weight lifting. This horrible event in our past was long done with. Didn't change the fact that he'd altered the course of our lives forever, but I truly forgave him. I wished no ill will on him for what he did. I choose to remember the good times I had with my dad and the good things he taught me. It didn't mean I wanted to rekindle a relationship with him, but I forgave him. And I loved him for giving me the good things that he did. He was and still is my dad. But there was another person that he had to forgive in this whole scenario. There was a whole lot of unforgiveness in his heart about himself. He did not want to forgive himself for the way that he had played his part that night when his dad was coming after them. In his mind, he felt he should have dealt with it a different way. And he hated what had happened because he felt like Devin being put in that position was wrong. He felt like he should have gone back into the house. He writes, the other person I had to forgive was myself. I didn't quite know how to do this. I said it out loud, but I needed to talk to Devin. He and I had hardly talked at all about that night, but we needed to. One day when I was visiting home from Oklahoma, we went fishing and we started talking about his days in rehab and in Colorado. He told me all about Emma, Tree, and Dream. And I told him about all the times I'd had flashbacks, how for years I'd felt terrible about not going back inside with him that night. As the older brother, I should have been the one to do what he did and not him. It's all right, man. We both did what we were supposed to that night. And we're all okay, Devin said. I just feel guilty, man. Had I gone in there instead of you, then maybe you wouldn't have had to go through all that, I said. I've never held anything against you, ever. You got us out of there that night. We were a team, and we both played our part. Don't feel bad about anything. And that's all I needed to hear. That night on Christmas Eve, we'd played the roles we had been raised to play. I was always planning for every scenario, and my planning that night got the three of us boys out of that house safely to get help. Devin was fearless in everything and lacked regard for consequence, and on that night, he was fearless and did exactly what he was supposed to do. You guys, I'm not going to make it through this book. I'm like, that is like the most touching thing, because that's the thing. Like, in life, we each have the roles we're born to play. Play them. And there's no mistakes being made here, you know? Gosh, okay. Last chapter 14. How did he start his YouTube channel? He said he started his education, his YouTube channel on October 2nd, 2018, but we have to flash back a little bit to the true start. He said when he and Tess were in Oklahoma City in 2017, he continued to collaborate with Daniel on their satirical articles for that publication they had called The Garlic, which is sort of like a spoof on The Onion. He said, we wrote very few toward the end of the training because of how intense the classes were. The information in the program wasn't overly complicated, but it was a lot to learn in a short amount of time. And not only did you have to fill in bubble sheets, you also had to apply the information to real-world scenarios. The pressure was on to pass, or you were back onto the streets without a job. More than 80% of your grade came from 3 problems on your final 2 days of the course, and you had to finish with 75.1% overall or higher. The quote problems were mock scenarios where you spoke on radios with fake pilots and other controllers to guide fake planes through fake airspace safely. One single mistake would cost you 5% of your grade. During the build-up to the last 2 days of testing, I studied my ass off every single day. Tessa was able to work from our apartment, and had I not had her with me every day after class, I would have gone insane. When I found free time, I tried to keep creating funny articles with Daniel, but our motivation on the site dwindled until one day Dylan messaged me. Hey man, I love your website. You should see what I've been doing on Twitter. I think I'm onto something. At this point, Dylan and I hadn't talked in a while. Once I joined the military, I lost touch with almost everyone I knew from before, so I was surprised to see Dylan even knew about our website. I went to Dylan's Twitter account, and he had amassed more than 100,000 followers tweeting about current events. I couldn't believe it. Dude, what are you doing? This is incredible, man, I said after I called him right away. Well, Twitter's amazing, and people like what I've been saying, apparently. You and Dave are literally the only ones who thought this was cool. All my other friends think I'm wasting my time. Wasting your time, Dill? What are you talking about? 100,000 people? That's insane. After that, we chatted almost daily about the possibilities of collaborating in the future. Dylan loved our articles, and I loved making humorous content about current events, sports, and pop culture. As excited as I was about all that, I had to put it to the side and focus. I needed to pass these problems and get a job as a controller. If I passed, I could be assigned to control center. My class would find out what places were available after we all finished the problems on the last day. At that point, I didn't care what location there would be. I just wanted to pass first and then worry about where Tessa and I would be going. There's a center in Minneapolis, so we kept our fingers crossed. Finally, the day came to run our first problem. I would run 2 of my 3 problems on the first day, so it was crucial to kill them and get the pressure off for the last problem on the second day. The simulators look exactly like you would expect, a dark room with radar equipment lined up on both sides of the wall with 12 stations total. When I walked in, I approached the remote pilot and my co-controller, the 2 who would be simulating the problem for me. The grader sat behind me, just over my shoulder. My heart raced. I hated the anxiety, but I remembered what my dad had taught me during wrestling. Be confident in the work I had put in. And when the bell rings and the match starts, the butterflies will go away. Besides, this was a nothing burger compared to some of the stress I'd been under before. I can do this, I told myself. I knew I could. Well, he gets started on the first problem. And he felt like he just breezed right through it. He felt great. But when it was over, the controller says, I got a 64 for you. Damn, I thought I'd killed it. And with that score combined with the written test during the first 16 weeks of my grade, I was sitting at about 69% overall. I needed to crush my last 2 problems. I did the second problem that day. 80, said the grader. Not bad, I thought. An 80 on any of the problems should have been good, but the score of 64 on the first one put me in a tight spot for the next day. It meant that I needed an 82 or better to pass the course with a 75.1%. I showed up the next day expecting to ace my last problem. That was my mindset. I'd worked my butt off for 16 weeks, and I was going to move on. I got into the simulator and began the problem. About 3 minutes in, I made a transmission. Delta 310, flight level 230 approved, and I immediately knew I'd messed up. The flight level should have been 250. The direction I gave made the aircraft clip a restricted airspace, which they counted as a plane crash. A colossal mistake. The max I could score after that mistake was an 85, and I still had 30 minutes left of the problem. Screw it, I said, I'm going to ace the rest of it. I got into the zone, and I did exactly as I was trained to do, not worrying about making another mistake that would ultimately wash me out of the program if I did. 85, well done, said the grader. You passed. I started floating on a cloud. I couldn't believe how much weight I had been walking around with until the moment I heard him say that I'd passed. It was one of the hardest things I'd done up to that point, and passing it remains one of the most gratifying things I ever felt. It was the ultimate learn and apply course, and I just passed it. Our class was an anomaly during that time in Oklahoma. 11 of the 18 of us ended up passing. I called Tessa immediately to tell her the good news, and when I did, she started sobbing. She was so happy. Not only was the work hard for me, the entire process took a lot of work and sacrifice for her too, and to see it pay off that day was just as gratifying for her. We had a dinner as a class that night. It was the best tasting steak and old-fashioned I've ever experienced. Well, it all seems like it's working out, right? He's going to be an air traffic controlman. Fantastic. He's going to make some money. No, because then they send him to Oakland, California. And I don't totally get what is going on in Oakland, California. But you go to the center and you're supposed to be doing more training. But he says that all new trainees spend 3 weeks memorizing their new airspace maps and call signs. And then you just sit around for a year waiting to simply start training. And that could last for 2 to 3 years. What? What kind of a system is this? I don't get it. Well, Tessa's like, is it a possibility to transfer, or is this our lot in life? Well, the answer was never. Or maybe in 20 years, but we didn't know that right then. A big problem, too, about this place is that it was just unbelievably expensive to live there. He says nobody wanted to live in the Bay Area, where the cost of living was to the moon and homeless people were living on every corner. Controllers who worked there made more than $200,000 a year, but were still driving 2 hours each way every day to work just so they could own a house. It was insane. It was an absolute backlogged mess at the center, which left it well under the national average for staffing levels. After a few months, I would learn that nobody was allowed to transfer out of Oakland unless staffing levels were above the national average. And Oakland would never be over the average because nobody wanted to be there. Yeah, I don't get this. I don't get any of this. But I can tell you right now, he made a great decision to start thinking that maybe this isn't what he needed to do with his time. Meanwhile, he was still working with Dylan on the side. Dylan had this newfound Twitter popularity. And so Desmond decided that he too would start a Twitter account. And they wrote funny skits together, and they had a YouTube channel. He said, I love talking about politics and current events, but I wanted to do the best I could to be humorous about it. There's enough people regurgitating talking points, so I wanted to try and keep it light, but also get my opinions across. When I created my Twitter account, I decided to not use my real name for a number of reasons. One, I was a federal employee, and I didn't want it to affect any chances I had with my upcoming training. I was in a liberal mecca, and if anyone found out I simply owned a gun, they might not train with me without bias. Two, my real name is hard for people to say. Not Desmond, but Janicek. I think I've heard it about 1,000 different ways. 3, as a movie junkie, I always thought it would be cool to create my own pseudonym. Jamie Foxx, for example, was born Eric Marlin Bishop. And Brad Pitt was born William Bradley Pitt. I wanted to make my own. I even did so when I submitted my book manuscript. I wrote as Desmond Tyler. I decided that was boring too, and I wanted to shorten my alias even more, so I used my middle name, Tyler, and I flipped my nickname around, Des, and got Zed. Tyler Zed would be my alias. As I continued waiting to start training or to get transferred to another center, I would write skits and funny tweets and think of things Dylan and I could do with our growing platforms on Twitter. Well, it's all, sunshine and happiness in the Twitter and YouTube world, but what of this full-time job he's got? A few months into sitting around at the center, I would find out about the national staffing levels and that certified controllers had been waiting to transfer for over 10 years. I'd have to be top dog with some time logged and then hope the staffing levels went up. Realistically, I realized that it wouldn't ever happen, and Tessa and I would have to stay in California forever. Gotta do something about that. So he starts asking around, what am I going to do here? Because one of his friends, against all odds, had a package to get out of this place. And this friend was transferring, and nobody else was managing to do this. So he asked his friend, well, how'd that happen? And the friend said, oh, I went and I got an allergy test. And I found out that I am allergic to native plants of California. And I can't stay here if I'm allergic to native plants of California. They have to transfer me. So he's like, you should do it too. And Desmond was like, yeah, I probably am allergic to some native plants because in the spring in Minnesota, I'm always stuffed up. And I'm allergic to bees, deathly allergic to bees. So score. Maybe this will come in handy for me. So he trots himself on over to the doctor. And, he lays there and they scratch him and poke him and they fill him up with natural California allergens. Not allergic to anything. So he's going to have to stay. And this is devastating. So he goes home and he and Tessa have a come to Jesus moment. And it's like, look, is this really what we want to do? Whoop-de-doo about this $200,000 a year. But what kind of a lifestyle is this? You have a 2-hour commute one way just so you can own a house? And we have to be in a place that we don't even like, away from our family, and we will never, ever, ever have hope of getting to move closer to our family? And it just seemed to them that they would be signing themselves up for a life that they hated just so that he could have a job. But there's lots of jobs. And she has a great job. It's not like his employment was the only thing that was going to keep them out of the poorhouse. They had some wiggle room to figure something else out, and this was not it. They wanted kids, and they did not want to raise their kids in California. So he says, we decided that sacrificing our families was not worth any job in the world, no matter how much it paid. And the next day I walked into the training office and told them I was giving up my training spot. And that was it. A month later, Tess and I drove home, and Daniel and I drove back out with his trailer to get our stuff. As scary as it was not to have a job to be able to support us, luckily Tessa had a great job. Once home in Minnesota, it didn't take me long to get a job. Daniel's brother-in-law had just bought a printing business and took me as a project manager. I had no idea what the hell I was doing in the print world, and it wasn't a prestigious job, but it paid well, and I was incredibly grateful for the opportunity. Now, along about this time, now that he doesn't have to worry about the air traffic control situation, now he can focus his attention on the stuff that's going on with Twitter and YouTube and growing that into something even bigger. He says our platforms grew and grew and grew, and so did the visions we each had for our future. Dylan had a giant voice in the conservative movement and was getting phone numbers of people on Fox News all the time and receiving invitations to speaking events. It was insane to see. As we towed the line with these big wigs in political media, the more I felt I was straying from the vision I'd had in my mind, the one that I'd felt good about. I didn't want to be a serious talking head in the windless political fight of left and right, and that's where I felt it was headed. I wanted to talk about these issues, but do so with humor. I wanted people to come to my pages and hear about some of the problems in the world, but not leave with a blood pressure of 200 over 100. In late 2018, we decided to do our own things as far as our platforms. Dylan kept on his path. I started my channel on YouTube called Zeducation. After I saw the potential, I became obsessive over YouTube. I knew that each platform had an algorithm, and according to all of the information available, if you studied your analytics and you kept improving every video, then the algorithm would start recommending your videos. I also truly enjoyed making my videos. I loved sharing the things I found interesting and important and funny, and I wanted to attract people who had the same interests as me. One of the best things I heard when I had less than 1,000 subscribers was, don't stop making videos. Just don't, no matter what. And I didn't. Eventually, my channel started making money, enough to where it could replace my salary at the print shop with the potential of earning more. When I showed Tessa the earnings, she said, maybe you should do this full time. There was no hesitation from her. There was no worry. She was all on board and supportive of me. Without her backing of me, Zeducation would have ended a long time ago. So I quit my full-time job and committed myself to my channel. It was a leap of faith, but I was confident that it would work. Just keep making videos, I always reminded myself. Soon enough, I got to the point where I needed help with everything, and I hired Devin in early 2021. He quit his full-time job and came to work for me full-time. Also a leap of faith on his part, but he believed in it and was just as committed as I was. Over the next few years, we grew the channel, busting our ass every day creating videos. Literally sun up to sundown, we were working on content. Eventually, we hired an editor, Megan, and Chase and Daniel even had a stint as full-time employees for the Zed Media Company. Eventually, we hired Bo. In December 2022, 4 years after the channel was created, Zeducation hit 1 million subscribers and continues to grow every single day. As I write this, I sit in the studio we built. My set behind me, our equipment in front of me. In a few minutes, Dee will be here and we'll go live in front of our audience like we do every morning. And after that, we'll work on videos for the week for Zeducation and the new Dee channel that's close to 100,000 subscribers. Everything we escaped to growing up, to our forts, to our videos, to our business ideas, is now something we live out in real life every day. The dream room. And now for the last chapter, chapter 15. It's really just a page, but it is really a sweet chapter. February 4th, 2022. I sped to the hospital. My heart raced. I didn't want to break any laws, but I wanted to get there as fast as I could. Please, God, let everything be okay. Please be with us, I prayed. I stayed as calm as I could. Getting overly anxious or excited was not going to help anything. I had to be solid in that moment, level-headed, calm, and collected. We got to the hospital and we waited and waited and waited. As we waited, Tessa's blood pressure dropped and her monitor started beeping warning sounds and lights. "Tessa, hey, can you hear me?" said the nurse as she ran into the hospital room. Tessa's consciousness began to fade. Her blood pressure plummeted and my level of worry reached 10 out of 10. "Keep talking to me, Tessa," said the nurse. The nurse began hurrying in what she was doing. She took the epidural catheter out of Tessa's back and injected her IV with something. I didn't know what, but Tessa started to come back. I breathed a sigh of relief. About an hour later, the doctor came in and began speaking with Tessa about what was going to happen next, and a few moments later, 2 assistants came in and helped the doctor. "Okay, now push, Tessa." In less than 20 minutes, on February 4th, 2022, Quinn Diane Janicek came into the world. My breath stopped when I saw my daughter for the first time. For 9 months, you prepare yourself for that moment, and for me, I felt like I had been preparing for longer. All I wanted was to be a dad. But there's no preparation for that feeling when you see your child for the first time. In that moment, I felt immense pride in the new responsibility I now had as her father, to teach, provide for, and protect this little person. I needed to be the best dad possible. I needed to be the strongest pillar in this girl's life, just like my family was for me. The doctor held Quinn as I cut the cord, and as I looked into Quinn's little eyes, I did everything I could to hold back my joy, but I couldn't. I began to cry seeing her. I had never felt happier. I sat and watched my wife hold my daughter, and I finally fully understood my purpose, my family, my anchor. The end. You guys, did I not tell you? It's a good book. Isn't it good? Y'all doubted me. When I said, I was like, I'm going to do this memoir from this other YouTuber, y'all were like, peace out. But I don't lie. That book's fantastic. It was so good. Well, I'm tired. I'm emotionally worn out. But it was so worth it, was it not? So good. So anyway, thank you all for staying with me for this week of 4 videos back to back to back. I know they were long videos, but thank you guys so much for being here with me, for sharing this book with me. And I'm thrilled that so many of you are not just listening to the review, but also going out and purchasing the book. This is the only book, I think maybe I said this earlier, but I'll say it again because it's so surprising me. This is literally the only book where people are like, I now have to go buy this book. Usually the comments I always get is, thanks for reading it. Now I don't have to buy the book, you know? And I did worry about that when I agreed to do this. And I said to him, I said, there's a lot of times when people have said to me that they won't buy the book because I'm doing this review. And I do a very extensive review. I'm basically reading the book to you. And so I was like, are you sure that I'm the one that you want to review this book? Because my style might hinder your sales. And he was like, no, you can do it. And so it's such a relief to me to see so many people wanting to go buy the book because I want it to do well. And I didn't want to be like one of the reasons it was not going to do well. Anyway, with a book like that, that's a book to own. you know you'll read that again. Because it's so good, it's almost like a movie. It's like, your favorite movie, you're going to watch it again, even if you already know the story. Well, this book is so good, you would read it again, even if you know the story. All right. Well, we've talked long enough and I'm very weary, but I will see you guys later. Thanks again. And of course, later this week, we'll be doing Diana. So if you have missed the royal content, it's coming back, even though there's a part of me that's like, royal content. What? That's going to be lame compared to what we just did. But, I'm sure I'll find my groove again. All right. I'm off to bed, but I will see you guys later. Bye.